In your speech, there will be nothing more important than your audience. If you do a good audience analysis, you can craft your speech to be effective in all formats, from an introduction speech to the informative speech to the persuasive speech. It even helps you know what jokes will work if you're relying on humor and what your audience will be resistant to. In this chapter, we really look at the audience-centeredness of a speech, the psychology related to your audience, demographics that you'll find within your audience, their disposition. This includes towards the topic and even towards you, and adapt your speech for the audience. Audience-centeredness. Who are they? You're going to be presenting in class. It kind of helps. You know you're going to be presenting to fellow students. You have some idea about who they are. But once you start publicly speaking, you have to begin to learn who your audience is. What do I want to tell them? What is the image you have in your mind you're trying to put in their mind? How are you going to help them to see from your perspective? How will you see from their perspective? And by learning these things, you will find the most effective way to compose your speech, to present your speech, to connect with your audience. It is easy if you get the opportunity to learn about your audience. One of the quickest ways to do this is if you're in a classroom, if you are at a symposium, if you are at a TED Talk. Watch the audience during other people's presentations. See how they respond. Find the friendly faces in the crowd. Because when you're presenting your speech, you have 1,000 people, you have 100 people, you have 10 people. You may not be able to make contact or even connect with everyone in the audience. For that reason, early on in your speech, you're going to find the friendly faces, the people you can talk to, the people that will give you the feedback you need to make it an effective speech. One trick is if your audience includes friends, beware of them. Unfortunately, our friends like having stories. And the best way to have a story is at your expense. So if you just talk to the friends you have in the audience, one of them might be making a goofy face. One of them might be making funny pictures and holding them up and showing them to you. They may be doing things to throw you off your game. So if you're going to talk to friends in the audience and not just the friendly faces, make sure that they're going to support your speech and not make a joke of it and throw you off. You can learn the psychology of your audience before you even present. Here are some ideas, some approaches you can utilize in your audience analysis to determine who your audience is and how they think. Know your audience before going in. In some cases, it's very simple. In the classroom, you already know you're with college students that are taking a public speaking class. But what about if you're presenting to a company? What about if you're presenting to an organization? Oftentimes, you can do research to learn about that organization. You can learn some of the demographics, you can learn their core beliefs, you can learn their ideas, as well as you can learn about where you're speaking. If you're speaking at a TED Talk, you already have an idea of the audience. If you're speaking at a senior citizen center, you have some idea about the audience. What is the situation around your speech? Are you there to sell something? Are you there to inform? Why are you giving this speech? Why have they asked you into their building, into their home, into their business? You can easily gather, okay, they want me to come there and inform them about Northern Colorado because they're talking about moving there. They want to know about it. So you automatically can tell they have some excitement. Their psychology is they're open to this. It's something they will embrace. On the other hand, if you're going to go talk about green energy to an oil company, you can guess about some of their psychology about it. That perhaps that is not what they want to hear. Maybe you're a counterpoint. Same goes if you're going from an oil company to talk to a green energy company. All these can give you important psychological identity or thoughts about your actual audience. And realize part of the reason why you're going in and looking for those friendly faces is you're going to have unfriendly faces. You're going to have people that will not support your idea. You'll have people that have stress from something else. They might be bored. They might be tired. They may have been up till 3 o'clock in the morning writing a paper. And so you walk into the classroom and that's the person you're going to make eye contact with, and they're drifting off to sleep. Well, you can't focus on that person. So understand, no matter what, you can't win your entire audience over. Demographics. We place a lot on demographics and it categorizes people. And that's unfortunate, but it can give you some insight about your audience and overall. Here are some things you may look for that might be features that will help you craft your speech. Age. Age can be important because it will tell you a lot about the person, and it will also tell you about how you write your speech. If you're writing a speech and you're going to present it at a college, you automatically know your speech is probably going to be people around 18 to 24, and then you'll have the non-traditional students that are a little bit older. But you will understand that they can comprehend many of the terms you're using, many of the concepts you present. On the other hand, if you go and you're going to speak to a group of middle school students or elementary students, you might have to change your speech completely because they're not going to understand advanced concepts. They may have not been introduced to things. Additionally, perhaps some of your pop culture references will be completely irrelevant. Trust this, coming from an older person. I sometimes do talk about shows, TV shows from the 80s or events in the 70s, and for my students, that doesn't connect. They didn't live through that, they didn't experience it, and they may have never watched the show. Gender. Gender is becoming much more diversified, or much broader perspective socially on that now. And so I really wouldn't look as tightly or closely at gender, because we have less of a binary society now. We have a society that is more non-binary, and you can easily get into trouble if you go in looking to talk to a gender. So for that reason, gender isn't as important of an audience analysis, but it can still play into some aspects of it. Just be careful with it. Religion and sexual orientation, additionally, can be things that if you're talking to a very diverse group, you want to avoid going into those. However, if you're going to go talk to a religious organization, you want to know what religious organization you're talking to and what their religion is. If you're going to give a sermon, that's another case. So those are things that oftentimes we have a tendency to categorize people into. They can be prevalent, but overall, your speech, when you're doing your analysis, should look at understanding there's going to be diversity in all those. So you don't want to make it too specific for a gender, an age, or religion, or sexual orientation. Instead, you want to gauge the importance of that to the group, and then make sure that your speech is presented well. Another thing that you'll encounter is racial, ethnic, and cultural background. Oftentimes we have a tendency to think of cultural as being entire regions. Understand that changes. If I was to give a speech up here in northern Colorado, I might look at more of a rural or demographic that is not, say, the same as the culture I would find in downtown Denver. If I'm talking to a group of musicians, I might know there's going to be a difference between talking to a group of punk rock musicians versus a choir. All those will have some differences. Group memberships. Are you talking to a group where they are formerly association of small businesses? Are they a different association? Are they grouped together? Have they come together because they share something? Know that, because when you're doing your analysis and you're crafting your speech, you want to make sure that you understand the group that you're talking to, their memberships, and their opinions, so that that way you can better craft your message. Size. If you're talking to a group of 10 to 15 people, it's going to be a lot different in your presentation than if you're talking to a group of hundreds. And for that reason, you really want to take size into consideration. Your physical setting, that can also be adjusted based on size. If you are talking to a small group, you might have a small setting where you're able to make eye contact with each individual. You're able to easily interact with your group. Meanwhile, if you're talking at a graduation, you could be up on a stage. You could be far away from your audience. You might have to project more. You might have a microphone. So the physical setting may change your actual analysis of the audience. This is the one that really becomes important in your audience analysis, especially with a persuasive speech and even informative to some degree. You want to go ahead and understand, okay, what am I presenting on? Now that I know the size of the group, I know if they're in an organization, I know their basic age, I know their different aspects of their demographics, then I can then start to look at, okay, are they interested in the topic I'm talking about? Is it relevant to them? Is it going to be important? What knowledge do they previously have about this? If you're going to go talk about computers to Information Technology Association, automatically they're going to have a lot of knowledge. And so you may have to up your speech's knowledge, and you might be able to use some of the terms that they will understand. On the other hand, if I'm going to talk about computers to elementary school or kindergarten class, they're not going to have a lot of knowledge on that. You may have to change your presentation. Their attitude, we're going to expand on that in a minute, but are they receptive to your message? Are they against it? Where exactly is their attitude at? Your audience's disposition is going to be something that will really help you shape your speech. If you're talking to a friendly audience, this is really going to be the easiest speech you give. Some of these may be a case of where you're speaking as the best man or the bridegroom at a wedding. It's a joyous time. Everyone's happy. They're friendly. You're saying nice things about the couple. They love it. It might be a case of, hey, if I walk into this college classroom, I'm going to talk about lowering tuition. That's probably going to be a friendly audience. And so those messages are easy to craft. They're the easiest ones to deliver, and they have the less stress. They might be apathetic, but they don't really have a opinion one way or another. They're just kind of there. This group isn't quite friendly, but they're not resistant to what you're saying and your ideas. And for that reason, it's not necessarily difficult to craft your speech. It's just you have to realize you need to go out there and you have to present with the ethos or your credibility. You should include that. You have to give them logical reasons to believe a certain way versus over something else. That'd be your logos. And perhaps the final thing is you can use emotion to kind of move them over. And this isn't a bad audience to have. The next one down from there is uninformed. They don't know what they think because they don't have enough information. In that case, you're going to have to build up their information. You're going to have to start somewhere with the logic, share it, begin a base of knowledge where it builds upon that so that they can then understand your more advanced message. So you're not stuck with, okay, they don't know anything about what I'm talking about, so I'm just going to give them my speech. No, you have to build up that base of knowledge for the uninformed, so that way you can be informative or persuasive. Finally is the hostile audience. These are the difficult ones, the ones that are hardest to move. And for that reason, you really need to establish through your analysis what you do share. What aspect of your message are they friendly towards, or at least apathetic towards? So that way you don't have to be confrontational with them. Instead, you can begin by sharing something, a bond, and from that bond, you're able to develop your speech to be informative or persuasive. Social judgment process. This comes from Sharif, who you may know from psychology, but this looks at, hey, this is how people will analyze. Normally, in between your introduction and the body of your speech, people will begin this. Social judgment might even come down to initially your clothing, that attention getter, and each aspect of your speech. Either they'll accept it, they'll be non-committal, or they'll reject it. And if you understand this, all right, I'm going to go speak in front of a group that might reject my message, that might be hostile towards what I'm saying. So what can I do in their latitude of acceptance that will make it easier? Perhaps it's the clothing you wear. If you're going to go into a business and you understand they might reject my message, well, then you should at least dress professionally so that way that doesn't go into the rejection. So you can begin your speech with some commonality and begin to move it. Here's another aspect of it that you can look at and examine. You can control different aspects of this: audience factors, processing, and persuasion outcome. Once again, when you've done your audience analysis, where you've looked at where you're speaking, who you're speaking to, their demographics, their knowledge on the topic, the setting, all of that goes into beginning to understand your audience. And then you can look at how they view your message, where you share commonalities, and what does move the audience so you can be effective in persuasion. There are multiple ways to get information about your audience. Fixed alternative questions. You can present audience members beforehand. Perhaps if you know members of the group you'll be speaking to, perhaps in class you'll do a quick question around them where it's like, okay, here's a yes or no. Do you like this topic? Yes or no? Or you can say, do you like this topic or this topic? And that becomes your alternative question. But you can poll your audience beforehand. Perhaps you can even poll members of a business that you're going to go speak to, an association you're going to speak to. You can give them scale questions. How important is this to your group? 1 to 5. Is 5 being the most important, 1 being least important? And since you're being invited in to talk to a group and to do public speaking, you can use your point of contact to do these questions. Both of those type of questions. Open-ended questions. This is one you should actually begin with when you're invited to speak to someone. What do you want me to talk about? Boom, right there. It'll expand out. And you can always ask your audience to directly. You can start out, if you know your topic well, you can ask them, so what are we going to talk about today? I'm here, I could talk to you about these 3 things. And you can ask them. Of course, for public speaking, that is a very dangerous thing. It works well in a classroom because you may have a wide range of knowledge you can share. But if you're coming on a persuasive speech and you're trying to sell a company something, asking them what you want to talk about might come down to, do you want to talk about the benefits of this product in relation to this other product? A comparison? Do you want to talk about how this product improves your life versus the cost? find out what is important to your audience, and then you can focus on that in your speech. Now, actually, most of these questions should occur before you hit the stage, because unless you really have 4 or 5 speeches you can just throw out there, you don't want to ask your audience at that point, but ask them when you're invited. Adapting to your audience before your speech. You might have a canned speech that you go around, a canned sales pitch that you go around and you use on everyone. And that's just the speech you use. Well, the problem is, if you've been invited to the Chamber of Commerce, you might want to, before the speech, talk to them so you can modify your standard speech to meet that audience. During the speech, if you're putting out information and they just look completely lost, they have no idea what you're talking about, understand, maybe your audience doesn't have enough information about the speech. Going back a few slides. So what you need to do then is, rather than just keep plowing through, keep delivering what you got, stop and say, well, here, let me tell you, and build up that information base so that that way you can then go into the important part of your speech with everyone being on board. So feedback during your speech can modify your speech. Remember, without an audience, you're just some person talking loudly to themselves. Again, your audience is the most important thing in your speech, not the product you have to sell, not you, not the organization. Your audience is. And if you remain focused on your audience, your speech will connect with them and it will be better. So in review, we really talked about you need to be audience centered. I know, here you are, you're the person with the light on you, you're the person at the front of the stage, you think you're the important thing. You're not. It is your audience. If you understand some of the psychology of your audience, the demographics of your audience, their disposition, all of these will help you craft your speech and understand your audience. And then as you're delivering, adapt to your audience. Change up. If you say something and you get a good laugh, it's okay. Well, this audience likes humor, so maybe you can work in a few more jokes and a few more views of the world. On the other hand, if your audience just gives you a blank stare at your joke, maybe using that second and third joke isn't a good idea. So the main thing you want to always take away from your audience analysis is, by learning your audience, by changing your speech to meet that audience, you will better connect with them, because you are truly there to bless your audience with what you have. You're not there to impress them. Of course, let me know if you have any questions on this chapter, and we'll connect on it, and we'll make sure those questions get answered for you.